so note-taking guide 7.4 on parallelograms. So here's the rules for parallelograms in this little box right here. The first one is that two sets of opposite sides are parallel. So this side up here is parallel to this side. Do you guys know how you mark parallel? Yeah, you can do, right, the symbol for parallel are those two lines. But if I wanted to mark these two lines parallel, I would put little arrows on them like this to show that they're parallel. And it says the second side of them are parallel also. So I can actually mark these ones with two little markings like that to show that they're parallel. So really what I have here is two parallel lines this way. Kind of, if you think about it, cut by two transversals this way, right? But those transversals happen to be parallel. So if you were to just think about it the way that I just said it, two parallel lines cut by a transversal, what do you know about this angle and this angle right here? Do you know what kind of angles they are if these are two parallel lines cut by a transversal? These would be called consecutive interior angles, right? And what do you know about consecutive interior angles?
Those two angles would be the same.
Ooh, they wouldn't be the same. They would be supplementary. They would add to 180. Consecutive interior angles add up to 180. But let's look at the rest of the rules and see what happens. But the same rules apply as they do with the transversals. So it says the two sets of opposite sides are, anybody know what this symbol means? It means congruent, and another way to describe congruent is the same or equal. So two sets of opposite sides are equal. So for instance, if I know that from here to here measures 12, guess what from here to here measures 12? And if this side over here is x, guess what this side over here is? X. Because the opposite sides are equal to each other, they're congruent, okay? It says opposite angles are congruent, which means if I know that this angle right here measures, say, 87, guess what this angle over here has to measure? 87, because the opposite angles are congruent, okay? Then here's the rule I was just talking about. Consecutive angles are supplementary. So inside a parallelogram, consecutive or interior angles, they're supplementary. They add to 180. So if this one's 87, what's this? It's going to be 93. What did you say? 93. And if this angle's 93, guess what this one is? 93, because of a couple of reasons. The first one, opposite angles are congruent, and the second one, that consecutive interior angles are supplementary, so these would have to add to 180. Okay. Another rule we know about parallelograms is that their diagonals bisect each other. So if you're going to draw this diagonal from here to here and this diagonal from here to here, we just made equal pieces. This piece is equal to that piece, and this piece is equal to that piece. Does that make sense what we're doing there? Okay. And then it says the diagonals form two congruent triangles. So this triangle here would be congruent to this triangle here. I think it's interesting to think about it because if you actually draw both sets of diagonals, you have two pairs of congruent triangles, right? Because this triangle would be congruent to this triangle, and this triangle would be congruent to that triangle. Or if you look at just the big triangles formed by a diagonal, they would also be congruent. So those are the rules of parallelograms. They're kind of hard to understand. But I think that if you think about them as two parallel lines cut by a transversal, you'll remember the rules pretty easily. So here on the first example, it says find the other angles in the parallelogram. Now it says it's a parallelogram, which means it follows the parallelogram rules. So do you want to go to B to figure it out, or do you want to jump to A or C? Which one? A. So what do you know about two consecutive interior angles inside this parallelogram?
They add to 180.
They do. So what does A have to be?
150 minus 180 is 30.
30, you're exactly right. Consecutive interior angles are supplementary, so they add to 180. All right, so what's B going to be? 150. You could have used that rule where a consecutive interior add to 180, or you could have used the rule that said opposite angles are congruent, either one. And then the last one, what is C going to measure? 30. You're right about that. So that angle measures 30, and we've solved the whole parallelogram. And then again, maybe just to check, anybody remember what a quadrilateral's angles add up to be? They add up to be 360. Did our angles add up to be 360? They did. So those rules that we learned yesterday and the day before, they still apply with parallelograms. Just parallelograms have some special rules, okay? All right, next one. Does anybody remember what we said about the diagonals? When they cut each other, they cut each other in half, right? So this side is equal to this side. So how can I solve for x there? What can I do? I can do x plus 10 equals 2x plus 30. Because the diagonals are equal to each other, I can set them equal to each other and solve for x. So I need to solve this equation for x now. So isolate the variables, get them all on one side together. So I'm going to subtract the x over. So I get 10 equals x plus 30. I'm going to subtract the 30 over. And I get negative 20 equals x. Now that's an interesting answer for the length of a diagonal's value of x. Because when I put x in right here, I would get negative 20 plus 10, which would be a negative 10. And I put negative 20 in right here, I'd have a negative 40 plus 30, which would be a negative 10. So the math worked out okay as far as making them equal to each other. But normally when we solve for the length of a diagonal, it would have to be positive because lengths are positive, right? So that's just an interesting question. That's what I get for grabbing a problem off the internet. I should have just made up my own. Anyways, but the math works. We found the value of x. The value of x would be negative 20, even though that's kind of a funky kind of problem to be doing. All right, next example says solve for x, and they give you two consecutive interior angles. So what do you know about these two angles right here? They do. They add up to 180. So take your x's. You have 4x plus 3x, which is 7x. Take your numbers, which are 12 and 14, which is 26. And set them equal to 180 and just solve for x now. So in order to do that, we would subtract the 26 first. Tell me what I get there. 180 minus 26.
154.
Thank you. And then what do I do to get x by itself? Yep. And x is 22. Now they didn't ask me for the angles, but if I wanted to know the measure of angle B, could you go back and tell me what it is? You would just substitute that in, right? 4 times 22 plus 12 and get the measure of that angle. And then you could check your work even by plugging it in here to make sure that those angles add up to 180 degrees. Okay? Questions on that? All right, last example today is showing us the sides of the parallelogram. And does anybody remember what we said about opposite sides of the parallelogram? Opposite sides are congruent as well as parallel, but they're congruent, which means they're equal to each other. So I can go 6x minus 7 and equal it to 2x plus 9. Okay, and then I can deal with these ones in just a minute, right? Because these are a totally different set of sides. So I just want to compare like sides together. So I'm going to do the 6x minus 7 equals 2x plus 9, and I'm going to solve it. What do you want me to do to solve this, you guys, to get my x's on one side together? Add 7. So I have 6x equals 2x plus 16. I got to move that 2x now then, right? So that the numbers are by themselves and the variables are by themselves. So subtract the 2x over. And I get 4x equals 16. So how much is x going to be? 4. Good. So x is 4. And then I still have to find out what my y is. So I'm going to solve for my y completely separate. I'm going to use my y value right here with my other equal side. So I'm going to do y plus 3 equals 12 because I know opposite sides are congruent. I can set my opposite sides equal to each other. And then this is really simple to solve for y. What do I do here? Just minus the 3 over, and I get my y value equals 9. So x is 4, y is 9.